Hey guys, today we're going to do a video on like weapon attachments, various weapons, how to use them more effectively, and which weapons are better at some things than others. Obviously, people use ARs, longer range, SMGs, run and gun, but we're going to get more in detail of that. A lot of my friends always ask me, yo, Steve, what do you use on X weapon? Or what are the attachments I should use on this weapon? What's your favorite of whatever weapon category? So we'll kind of get into that. A couple things before we start. I want to go over things like a heavy barrel is something I'll reference in the video a lot. A heavy barrel is anything that gives these pros and cons: damage range, bullet velocity, recoil control at the cost of ADS speed and movement speed. And then like a medium barrel would be something that gives you damage range, bullet velocity with no recoil control, but you also still lose ADS speed and movement speed, but not as much. There are a couple guns that have that, so we'll get into that later. Another thing, diminishing returns. So if I go ahead and pick this, it gives me a lot of recoil control, and then I say we'll grab this for recoil control and that for recoil control, as well as like a compensator, and maybe throw in another recoil attachment. So this would be diminishing returns, because there's to a point where the stat bar stops mattering, and the stat bars don't really matter at all anyway, more or less, because a gun gets to a point where it has no noticeable recoil, assuming you know how to use your thumb if you're on controller or your mouse on PC. So you don't want to pick up too many of the same pros, and you also don't want to stack too many of the same cons, and we'll kind of get into that more here in a bit. And then going back to the stat bars are misleading. It like I said with the diminishing returns, it says I have a ton of accuracy and a ton of control, so realistically I shouldn't have to control my recoil with this setup, but I still would at long ranges. So you don't want to always trust the stat bars. Sometimes they're relevant and sometimes they're not. But we'll start with like the ARs. The M4 is my favorite AR in the game. I know, M4, you're so cool. Anyway, the setup I personally like to use is this. Just this, really simple. Notice how I'm not stacking too many of the same, kind of attachments. The compensator I think is really good. When it comes to ARs, I think you should pretty much always have a compensator on. It says that it reduces ADS speed and aiming stability. It actually only reduces your aiming stability, and not even by a noticeable amount. The ADS speed cost is less than 1 frame at 60 FPS, according to many big YouTubers testing. You can go watch any of their channels. I'm sure you can find one for all the specific stats and numbers, all that crap. I also like to use the heavy barrel, and some of the ARs have multiple heavy barrels. The M4, the Kilo, the AK, they all have multiple. So you could use this one too. It gives you less of the pros, but also takes away less. So kind of just up to you. The no stock, the only real noticeable thing you'll notice from its cons is the aiming stability, which can cause like random inconsistencies in the recoil patterns, but you kind of get used to that happening sometimes. But that's why I use the red dot. I think it's easier to like counter aiming stability with the red dot. And then speaking of red dots, I'm not sure if this is like a proven thing, but apparently people like this red dot over some of the others because it's more stable. I haven't tested that, and you can test it for yourself, but I personally like this one anyway. And if the pros use it because it's more stable, who am I to, argue with guys who make a lot of money playing this game? If you don't really care for the red dot on like the M4, for example, you can put the stippled grip tape on. However, I've noticed that we've got 1, 2, 3 attachments with minus aiming stability. We don't always want to be doing that. You can get away with it. Go for it. But again, it's going to increase that chance of, you know, random recoil patterns that your idle sway will cause. What to avoid on ARs would be something like guns like that, or not guns, I'm sorry, barrels or attachments in general like these ones that reduce bullet velocity, you know, give you ADS speed or movement speed and reduce your recoil control and bullet velocity, because then you're kind of getting into that like submachine gun category, and you're really just weakening the strength of your weapon to try and make it into a different weapon when you can just use a different weapon. If you're just trying to have fun, you know, go for it. Make a random class. But if you're trying to have fun by doing well, or do well while having fun, maybe avoid them. There are a lot of ARs that have, you know, attachments like that, that kind of make the gun not as good. You know, like the SCAR, for example, has one right here. The SCAR already has a little bit of recoil because it has a higher, you know, damage rate. So you don't really want to like nerf your gun anymore, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So I picked the Commando foregrip on my AR. I pretty much use this on every AR. If I put a grip on an LMG, it's probably this one, minus one exception that I'll show you later. The reason being is it increases your aiming stability and your recoil stabilization. So if we go back to my M4, if I can find it, I'm sorry. We've got plus aiming stability, and then we just have two attachments that reduce it. So the Commando foregrip kind of like fights that offset. And also recoil stabilization, for those of you that don't know, is side-to-side recoil. It's way easier to just pull your thumbstick down or your mouse down and not down into the side. It just eliminating that side-to-side recoil, even though it's very little on most guns in the game, really helps you stay like precise and helps you learn the recoil curve a lot easier. This is really good for like new players. However, if you personally find that that's, you know, no big deal for you, you can use like the Ranger foregrip, which is what I would personally recommend for ARs. And then here's another setup for a drastically different AR. The M4 is already, you know, one of the easier ARs to use, so the attachments are harder to mess up. So here's a weapon that most people don't use, the AK-47. Again, the compensator, it's just free recoil control. Even if there's slight recoil on an AR, you can still use this, and then you don't have to control your recoil at all in some situations. Here's one of the medium barrels I was referring to. The AK is one of those guns that a lot of people like, but they don't use because it's very bad. We'll say, maybe that's a little harsh. It just has a lot of kick, and it's really hard to build it effectively. You really have to play like a true, you know, Anchor-esque role when you pick the AK. You can't always run and gun. Yes, you can mod kit it with the ammo conversions. But again, that kind of goes into the territory of changing a weapon into another type of weapon when you can just use one of those other type of weapons. Because the AK has a lot of recoil, I would use something like the skeleton stock. If you notice your gun has a lot of recoil, or you have a lot of trouble controlling recoil, don't pick the no stock. Pick skeleton or close quarters stock. And, you know, maybe after a while using the gun, switch to, you know, the no stock. That way you can kind of like ease yourself into it. Because if you just pick the most recoil heavy gun and then put the no stock on it, you might not like the gun when the gun might actually be pretty good. Moving on to like the SMGs. MP5 is obviously the most used SMG in the game. Now, unlike the ARs, you can use two different kind of muzzles for like respawn modes, and that would be compensator or the muzzle brake, because the SMGs have a lot more side-to-side recoil than the ARs, and that's because their accuracy and stability and stuff is already like prematurely worse than an AR's. So when you use, you know, something like a lot of people use the collapsible stock, like myself included, your aiming stability is going to be a lot lower. So instead of your recoil just going up straight, it'll go up straight, maybe to the left, then it'll go back right. You know, it might just be super random. And the muzzle brake will help you prevent, you know, some of that side-to-side recoil that starts off after you start shooting due to the collapsible or no stock option. Personally, I use the compensator because I don't really have an issue with any of the side-to-side recoil. But again, that's totally personal preference. Neither of these actually reduce your ADS speed, despite them saying they do. So don't really worry about that, at least at 60 FPS. Most of the testing that people have done in this game is at 60 FPS because most of the players are on console. Barrel attachments, you typically want to avoid on most SMGs. There are a couple, you know, upsides to using them. Like I use this one sometimes on Search and Destroy, almost every time on Search and Destroy, really. But all the barrels that are decent reduce your ADS speed on the SMGs. Like this is the only good barrel, and it reduces your ADS speed. And when you pick an SMG, you want to be running around gunning people down, you know, moving all the time, ADSing fast-paced gameplay, all that, you know, stuff. So when you pick this, you really just hinder that gameplay. That being said, again, still good for Search and Destroy. That way people don't hear your shots. I use the no stock or collapsible stock on every single SMG. It gives you so much mobility and just caters to the gameplay style that you should be going for when you pick an SMG. You should definitely avoid, you know, the aiming stability or the, you know, the I'm gonna hunker down type of attachments on SMGs in general, because you're not picking an SMG to play that way. A good kind of example of this is my friend Zach. He stopped using the M4 because he wanted to always rush around, and then he's like, I should just use an SMG because this is what SMGs are good for, and that's what he does now, and it's working for him. I know, it makes sense, crazy. For SMGs, you kind of can use whatever except this tactical foregrip. Don't ever use this, it's just bad. Personally, for public matches, the Merc foregrip is really good. It just tightens your hipfire spread so much. It doesn't really seem to give you much recoil control though. Most of the benefit of this is just the hipfire, which is really nice up close. You know, a guy comes around the corner, you don't have time to ADS, you just hipfire him. Second best vertical grip would be the operator grip. This is what a lot of pros use right now. Granted, the Merc foregrip is banned in professional play at the moment, so they go with the operator foregrip. So if you want to emulate the best players in the game, use the operator foregrip. It just makes sense. However, if you're struggling with that side-to-side recoil, but you really like the compensators for vertical recoil control, you can slap on a commando foregrip. It's really good, honestly. It actually is. I would use it if it wasn't for how broken the hipfire, you know, radius becomes with the Merc foregrip. This thing can literally hipfire you from like 15 meters. It's really silly, but if you find that you're, you know, not exactly hipfiring all the time with the Merc foregrip, not really utilizing it, maybe try out the commando foregrip. It really tightens up some of that, you know, random recoil pattern that you might have trouble controlling. You can use really either of these. For the MP5 specifically, for most SMGs you want to avoid like larger mags because they do slow you down. As far as movement speed, none of the base magazine upgrades typically reduce your ADS speed. Some of the larger magazine upgrades will reduce your ADS speed, but they all do reduce your movement speed, so you have to think of that before you pick one. Excuse me, sorry. 10mm rounds is honestly just superior in multiplayer to the 9mm base rounds. If you can afford the attachment slot, based on what you decide to pick out of what I'm saying here, I would definitely use this. You do lose recoil control, but you make that up with the compensator. They kind of counteract each other. And then this is kind of, if you look at my stat bars, this is kind of what I mean, even more so with like stat bars don't matter. I lose fire rate, which is okay, because I'm gaining so much damage and range that I'm offsetting that. I might shoot one bullet less every 10 seconds or something, but I'm going to be killing you much faster. Lasers for the SMGs are really good. If you like I was showing some of them, some of my friends, if you use the 5mm laser and the Merc foregrip, you sometimes don't have to ADS. Literally 10, 15 meters away, you can just hip fire people. This is really strong in hardcore if you guys play hardcore, and it's still strong in regular gameplay. Maybe you see a guy, you start shooting, you can shoot while you ADS, or while you're transitioning into that ADS. So having like the laser really helps. The downsides, of course, are you need to pay attention to your laser. If you use the 5mm laser, it's visible at the hip, but if you ADS, it goes away. And the tac laser is the opposite. It's only visible while you ADS. However, I would recommend just using the 5mm laser. Going over to a different SMG, you want to avoid barrels like the heavy barrel on SMGs. You're losing a lot of mobility and ADS speed when you want that mobility and ADS speed. You can get away with a medium barrel. I know a lot of the pro players, top amateur players, were using medium barrels like this one when they were trying out different SMGs due to MP5 nerfs. Personally, this is what I would use, is the FSS Strike. For the MP7, it's pretty good. The main reason why this one is just so much better is you don't lose movement speed, and you want your movement speed to be maxed. Again, I always use no stock on every SMG. I don't care about the accuracy or control loss because I'm going to try and get in your face as much as I can, and so it doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to beam you from 40 meters with an MP7. Can I? Sure. But is that my game plan? No. Should it be your game plan? No. And again, you can kind of compensate for some of that recoil loss with the compensator, or you could do the muzzle brake. Totally up to you, whatever your personal preference is. And then we already went over the underbarrels and the lasers. Kind of the same thing. SMGs are kind of lame in the sense that they kind of just use the same stuff, no stock, with Merc foregrip, maybe throw a laser on. So these three are what I would use on like this weapon, and then I would kind of just pick whatever you like the best. If you like a red dot, despite this having a great iron sight, use a red dot. If you like the laser, go for it. You want the underbarrel attachment? Sure, that's probably what I would do. Not every gun is going to have like a you must run this for it to be good kind of attachment setup. Most guns are going to have like one or two attachments that you absolutely should use, and then the rest is kind of just whatever you want. Another SMG, for example, that's really good, that it's kind of weird. It's the AUG. My buddy Shane asked me, hey, what do you use on your AUG the other day or other week? I don't remember. So I just gave him, my class setup. It's just this. maximize my recoil control with that compensator once again, free ADS speed, sprint to fire speed, get that stabilization, and then again a medium barrel, avoiding, you know, one of these heavy barrels. We don't want to use those. So I want to keep my movement speed high so I can keep moving around the map. These are just kind of things you have to like pay attention to when you're building your class based on the weapon that you're picking. I won't talk about LMGs too much. Don't build it like a fast-paced AR, you know. Don't always want to go for the no stock. It might look good on those stat bars, but you're picking an LMG to hold down a lane or something, or, you know, gun people down from a distance, and this no stock is going to increase your recoil control or decrease your recoil control by quite a bit at those longer ranges or in those continued sprays. Now you could probably get away with something like close quarter stock, because they didn't specifically nerf this like they did the no stock. Most of the LMGs have some sort of heavy barrel or medium barrel. I know it's kind of confusing. This one says heavy barrel. You can kind of pick whichever one you like. I would probably use this because I don't care about the movement speed nerf because I'm already slow as fuck. PKM, for example, has a unique attachment, snatch grip. If you use the PKM, always use this. It's really good. I don't know why it's, you know, not on the other LMGs. Maybe because it's just that good. Who knows? Going on to a more meta LMG. I don't think this is what I would use for multiplayer specifically, but this is the Warzone loadout. And it kind of just showcases how an LMG should be used. You've got range, recoil control, damage range, bullet velocity, you know, a laser to make it just a little bit more stable and snappy, and a sight. Nothing, you know, crazy. You don't see them taking off that for the no stock. It's not an AR, it's not an SMG. When you pick an LMG, you're using an LMG, and you have to remember that. So don't always, you know, try and go for the fast LMG, you know. You're not going to be bunny hopping around corners with LMGs. Can you? Sure, go for it, dude. But it's not what you should be picking these for. I would use LMGs on like domination or something to really just hold an objective. Like maybe your team needs A instead of C. You got to hold down A with that LMG. People call you a camper, but you'll be a winning camper. If you use a sniper in multiplayer, always set it up for maximum ADS speed. I'm not good at quickscoping, so maybe I'm not the right guy to, you know, talk about this, but none of the maps in the game are so huge that putting on ADS speed attachments instead of damage range attachments are ever going to hinder you. Sure, if you hit like their stomach, you might sometimes get a hit marker. Okay, that's fine. But you're going to be able to quickscope, you can still hold your breath and get like those longer shots. Headshots are always one shots with any of the snipers in multiplayer. So I personally would just make it so you can ADS fast. So you can go from target to target if they're running across an open lane, open field, whatever. And try not to ADS for too long because of the glint. You might get spotted in a spot where you'd normally be very hard to spot. So keep that in mind. Shotguns, again, kind of like the SMGs. If you pick a shotgun, unless you're using the slug rounds, you're going to want to be moving around fast. This is just a shotgun I used like back when I was getting camos. The muzzle choke, it's really good for shotguns. Gives you the tighter pellet spread and the damage range at the cost of ADS speed. This makes it so that you can like kind of sometimes one-shot people from a lot further away than you think you could, as long as you ADS. And then some of the barrels aren't really that good. On this shotgun specifically, I use this barrel because it complements the choke. And then you can usually use a laser to increase your mobility, and the no stock to further increase your mobility, because with a shotgun you want to be getting in front of people's face, because that's where shotguns are best. So don't take away movement speed from shotguns, I guess, is the main thing. You can kind of build them, you know, lots of different ways, but try not to take away the mobility, because then you're really just hindering it way too much. Before I get into Warzone, we're going to talk about the AUG. I know I already showed it off in the SMGs, but the AUG can obviously also ammo convert to an AR. When you use the AUG with AR rounds, it is no longer an SMG. So you should play it like an AR. You should position, holding angle, stuff like that. Not necessarily always running around, slide canceling around corners, getting in people's faces. You should try and hold longer spots, power positions, stuff like that. Warzone is kind of stale. I know, it's kind of lame. Most people use ARs or they use the Bruin. If they use the Bruin, they use the attachments that I already showed. Those are really good for Warzone. But if you're not using the Bruin, pretty much you should use what I'm about to show you on almost every gun for ARs and LMGs. These 4 attachments are pretty much always necessary for ARs. Monolithic suppressor, heavy barrel, larger mag, commando foregrip, and then from there you can kind of pick a 5th attachment. On the M4, I like to use the tac laser. You can use a red dot or the hollow sight that people like, or you could even use the VLK if you want a little bit more range. It's kind of up to you. For Warzone, I would avoid things like the no stock because they reduce your recoil way too much at long range. If you're using overkill for your secondary perk and you use an SMG, obviously you can use the MP5. That's the best one, I know. Or you can use MP7, and this is kind of where that monolithic integral suppressor that I pointed out earlier comes in handy, because it gives you the suppressor for Warzone, and it gives you bullet velocity, so you get that little bit of extra damage at range, or faster time to kill, I should say. So yeah, you always want to put the suppressor on there. Again, I use the collapsible. I'll always use no stock or collapsible on SMGs, whether it's Warzone or multiplayer. It doesn't matter. Right now I have the laser on here, but you can also take off the laser and put on sleight of hand. This just makes it so that you can kill a target, reload quickly, kill another target, or kill 2 targets or something. Maybe you're popping off. And then of course, since it is Warzone, you want to use extended mag. This lets you break people's plates, down them, and kill them without having to reload. And then if you do have to reload because maybe you missed some shots, you've got the sleight of hand. The other SMG that a lot of people use is the MP7. And personally, I would build it a little differently from the multiplayer one. And that would be something like this as like my base. And from here you can kind of build however you want. It does already have a 40 round mag, so you could increase that if you wanted to, but you got to keep in mind those penalties. Personally, I would use like the 50 round mag, maybe. I don't use this gun too much, but this should give you like a good idea as to what you can use on, an MP7 should you run this. And then I sometimes see people use the FENNEC. I'm not really going to talk too much about the FENNEC because I personally think it's really bad. Its time to kill is never better than the MP5's. It's not as good at kind of around that 15 meter mark or so as like an MP7. It's really, really good when you get right in someone's face though. So if you find that your SMG is only ever pulled out when you're literally right inside some dude's face, just barrel stuffing them, try out the FENNEC. I don't have attachments for you on this one, but you can kind of use what I said earlier in the video in the SMG section, or even just the SMGs I just showed you, to kind of go ahead and pick what you'd want. I would obviously recommend the 40 round mag for Warzone. But yeah, other than that, I haven't really done too much with the FENNEC in Warzone. Yeah, you really just want to avoid attachments in Warzone that, hinder your gun. Like I said, you know, don't put no stock on the M4 for Warzone. Don't put a bunch of range attachments on your SMG if that's your secondary. If your secondary is a sniper, go ahead and, you know, pick whatever sniper you prefer. I like the HDR because it's much better at range than the AX50 or the Kar 98. And I would use something like this, or you can use this backstock. I think I recently changed it, I just haven't changed my blueprint. This gives you a lot of accuracy, a lot of range, bullet velocity, so you don't have to lead your shots as much. And then I personally like the variable zoom because it lets you see people really far away. However, I will say I don't snipe that often, if ever, in Warzone. I just have this made up so that if I want to snipe one day, I can just toss it on. Another Warzone class that you'll see people use is the MP7. We'll just kind of go ahead and pick this. Alright, it'd probably look like this. And then they'll use overkill with a Kar 98. Kar 98 kind of follows the same thing as like the HDR, but it's a little faster. You want a suppressor on there. Maybe you want to put on one of these barrels to give it a little more range. Personally, I would maybe go with this 25.1 inch barrel, or maybe even the 27.6. This is kind of the thing where you kind of have to like pick what you like, because the differences are so small. And then obviously you want a sniper scope. But yeah, these are kind of the setups you'll see people run. An AR with an SMG, an AR with a sniper, an SMG with a sniper, an LMG with a SMG. You usually don't see an LMG with a sniper rifle though, because they're both just really good at range, so what's the point? But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions on, like, you know, specific attachments for a certain gun, feel free to ask. Most of the ARs though are pretty much cookie cutter. Most of the SMGs are really similar. I know some of them have a few different attachments. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, just go ahead and ask. Comment down below. I will be doing another video soon on like how to position in game with an AR, or how to play an SMG. Although most of you guys already know this kind of thing, so we'll see. But I would like to do one of those. But yeah, if you guys have any feedback, go ahead and let me know down below as well. That'd be great, and I will catch you guys next time. Thanks.